The rain-slicked streets of San Francisco's Tenderloin district gleamed like shattered glass under the sodium glow of street lamps, and Delaney Harper had just locked the back door of her tiny bistro when she heard the gasp. A sharp, involuntary sound that cut through the downpour like a knife. She spun around, her chef's whites soaked through in seconds, and there, huddled against the overflowing dumpster, was a girl no older than 20, her threadbare hoodie plastered to her shivering frame, clutching a cardboard sign that read "Anything helps" in faded marker. "Hey," Delaney called out, her voice steady despite the knot twisting in her gut. "You can't stay here. The cops'll sweep through any minute, and this alley's no place for anyone tonight." Delaney's hand hovered over the door handle, keys jingling like a guilty afterthought, but something in the girl's wide, haunted eyes, dark pools reflecting the neon flicker from the bodega across the street, pinned her in place. It wasn't pity that rooted her. Delaney had seen plenty of desperation in her 35 years slinging plates in this city of dreamers and dropouts. No, it was the raw, unspoken plea in that gaze, the kind that whispered of stories buried deeper than the fog rolling in from the bay. "Come on," she muttered, more to herself than the stranger, unlocking the door again and jerking her head toward the warmth spilling out from inside. "I've got leftover gumbo. It's not charity. It's just good food going to waste." The girl didn't move at first, her body coiled like a spring ready to snap, but then she unfolded herself from the shadows, steps tentative as a fawn's on ice. Up close, Delaney could see the grime etched into her pores, the faint bruise blooming purple along her jawline like a cruel watercolor, and the way her fingers trembled not just from cold but from whatever ghosts chased her through the night. "I'm Margaret," she said finally, voice cracked and small, as she ducked under the awning, water sluicing off her in rivulets. "And, thank you. Really." Inside the bistro, the air hung heavy with the ghosts of dinner service. Garlic and thyme lingering like old lovers, the faint sizzle of a cooling grill, the clink of glasses stacked haphazardly on the pass. Delaney flipped on the under-cabinet lights, casting a golden halo over the scarred wooden counter, and busied herself reheating the gumbo, her mama's recipe, thick with andouille and okra, the kind of soul food that stuck to your ribs on nights when the world felt too thin. Margaret perched on a stool like she might bolt at any second, her eyes darting to the exits, the windows, the knife block gleaming innocently on the counter. "You from around here?" Delaney asked, sliding a steaming bowl across the stainless steel, along with a hunk of cornbread she'd baked that morning, golden-crusted and studded with jalapenos. Margaret's laugh was a brittle thing, more exhale than sound. "Around here? Nah. Grew up in the sticks, Eugene, Oregon. Rainy as hell, trees taller than God. Ran away when I was 16. She spooned up a bite, and her eyes fluttered shut for a beat, savoring the spice that bloomed slow and deep. This is home." The word hung between them, fragile as spun sugar, and Delaney felt it snag in her chest. Home. She hadn't had one of those in years, not since her own mother passed, leaving behind a shoebox of recipes and a daughter too stubborn to cry at the funeral. Not since the ex who'd packed up and left for a gallery opening in New York, taking Delaney's heart and half the restaurant's vintage wine collection with her. They talked, or rather Margaret spilled in fits and starts, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them too long. Abusive foster homes after her parents OD'd on fentanyl when she was 12, hitchhiking down the coast, crashing in squats from Portland till each city blurring into the next until San Francisco's hills swallowed her whole. "I'm not a junkie," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "Just lost. You know." Delaney nodded because she did. She'd come out at 18, back in the Bible Belt of her childhood, and the fallout had been a slow bleed. Disowned by her father, ghosted by high school friends, nights spent sobbing into her pillow until the rage turned her toward the fire of a commercial kitchen. Cooking was her rebellion, her armor, flames that didn't judge, flavors that forgave. By the time the gumbo was gone, the rain had eased to a drizzle, and Margaret's shoulders had unclenched just a fraction. "I should go," she said, but there was no conviction in it, and Delaney, wiping down the counter with a rag that smelled of lemon and bleach, surprised them both. "Crash here tonight. The office couch pulls out. It's lumpy as hell but dry. I'll call the women's shelter in the morning. They owe me a favor." Margaret's eyes searched hers, probing for the catch, the fine print, but Delaney just shrugged, her crooked smile the only explanation. "World's cold enough without us making it worse." That night, as the city hummed its restless lullaby beyond the frosted windows, Delaney lay awake in her apartment above the bistro, listening to the faint rustle of sheets from downstairs. Margaret. The name rolled through her mind like a melody half-remembered, stirring something she hadn't felt in years. Not lust, not quite, but a quiet ache, the pull of two souls recognizing their own wreckage in the other's. Downstairs, Margaret curled into the pull-out, the gumbo settling warm in her belly, and for the first time in months, sleep came without the claw of nightmares. But dawn brought the inevitable. The shelter van idling outside at 7 a.m., caseworkers with clipboards and kind eyes, promises of beds and job training that sounded too good to be true. Margaret hugged Delaney at the door, fierce and fleeting, her hoodie still damp. "You saved me tonight," she whispered, and Delaney, throat tight, just pressed a 20 into her palm. "Buy yourself coffee. And come back if you need to. Doors always open." She didn't come back. Not that week, not the next. Delaney told herself it was for the best. Another drifter in a city full of them, moving on to brighter lights or deeper shadows. She threw herself into the bistro, renaming it Harper's Hearth on a whim, infusing the menu with southern twists. Shrimp and grits with a Cali kick of Fresno chiles, pecan pie tarts drizzled with lavender honey from the farmer's market. The place buzzed, critics from the Chronicle dropping in, calling her food soulful Americana with a queer edge, and Delaney laughed it off over late-night whiskeys with her sous chef, a non-binary firecracker named Jax who wore bow ties unironically and flirted with everyone. But the empty stool at the counter haunted her, a ghost in the flower-dusted air. One evening, 3 months later, as the fog clawed at the windows like jealous fingers, the bell above the door tinkled, and there she was, Margaret, but not. Her hair was clean, pulled into a neat ponytail that swung like a pendulum. She wore jeans that fit, a flannel shirt tucked in, and sneakers without holes. In her hands, a paper bag from the corner bakery, steam rising from what smelled like fresh beignet. "I got a job," she announced, sliding onto the stool with a grin that lit the dim room. "Barista at that hipster spot on Haight. Tips are shit, but it's steady. And I wanted to say thanks. For real this time." Delaney's heart stuttered, but she played it cool, plating up a tasting menu on autopilot. Oysters Rockefeller with a twist of smoked paprika. Duck confit sliders that melted like confessions. They ate, laughed, Margaret's stories now laced with tentative hope, tales of NA meetings in church basements and a roommate who baked sourdough at 3 a.m. "You're the first person who didn't look at me like trash," she said softly, as the last diner shuffled out, leaving them alone with the hum of the fridge and the distant wail of a cable car. Delaney reached across the counter, her callous fingers brushing Margaret's, and the touch lingered, electric as a storm front. "You were never trash. Just human. Like the rest of us." From there it bloomed slow like yeast and dough friendship first, forged in late shifts and shared silences. Margaret started helping out, washing dishes for extra cash, her quick hands and quicker wit earning her a spot on the line. Delaney taught her knife skills, the rhythm of a roux, how to temper chocolate without cursing the gods. And in the quiet hours after the plates were cleared and the wine was poured, their conversations deepened, peeling back layers like onions in a mirepoix. Margaret spoke of the foster dad who'd cornered her in the laundry room, the night she stole a bus ticket south just to breathe. Delaney shared her own scars. The girlfriend who cheated with her best friend, the coming-out letter she burned instead of sending home. "Love's a bitch," Delaney said one night, elbows on the bar, bourbon warming her veins. "But it's the only thing worth the burn." Margaret's eyes, soft in the lamplight, met hers. "Maybe it's not a burn. Maybe it's fire." And then, tentative as a first kiss, she leaned in, lips brushing Delaney's in a question wrapped in warmth. Delaney answered with her hands in Margaret's hair, pulling her close, the world narrowing to the taste of sugar and spice, the beat of two hearts sinking like a perfect sear. It was tender, unhurried, the kind of kiss that promised tomorrows, not just tonight. They tumbled upstairs to Delaney's loft, a nest of exposed brick and potted ferns, where clothes shed like old skins, and bodies moved with the reverence of survivors finding grace. No fireworks, no frenzy. Just skin on skin, whispers in the dark, the quiet miracle of being seen. Months blurred into a rhythm as steady as the tide crashing against the Embarcadero. Mornings tangled in sheets that smelled of vanilla and rain. Afternoons chopping garlic side by side in the kitchen, evenings stealing kisses between orders, the bistro's patrons none the wiser to the spark igniting behind the swinging doors. Margaret thrived under Delaney's wing, her confidence blooming like wildflowers through concrete cracks. She enrolled in community college, night classes in business and culinary arts, her backpack slung over one shoulder as she dashed from lecture halls to the restaurant. "I'm gonna own my own place someday," she'd declare, eyes fierce with that Oregon grit, and Delaney would ruffle her hair murmuring, "Damn right you are, kiddo," even as her chest swelled with something fiercer than pride, love, the real kind rooted deep and thorny. But San Francisco had a way of testing its lovers, whispering doubts through the fog like a jealous siren. It started small, Margaret's late nights studying, the way she'd zone out during dinner rush, phone buzzing with texts from a study group that included a girl named Riley, tall, tattooed, with a laugh like wind chimes and a trust fund that paid her tuition. "Just friends," Margaret insisted the first time Delaney asked, her voice light but her eyes skittish. Delaney believed her because what choice did she have? Trust was the mortar holding their fragile empire together, and she'd be damned if she'd let jealousy crack it. Then came the whispers from the line cooks, Jax pulling Delaney aside one slow Tuesday. "Boss, you hear about that investor sniffing around Margaret's program? Some hotshot from the valley, throwing galas for up-and-coming queer talent." Delaney waved it off, but the seed took root, watered by the late hours Margaret now kept, coming home with cheeks flushed not from wine but from whatever electric energy the city nights fed her. One evening, as Delaney plated seared scallops for a table of tech bros, she overheard Margaret on the phone in the walk-in, voice hushed and urgent. "No, Riley, it's not like that. I love her, okay? But this opportunity, it's huge. Love her." The words echoed, a bomb and a blade, and when Margaret emerged, cheeks pink, Delaney pulled her into the alley for a smoke, the air thick with the scent of garbage and possibility. "What's going on?" Delaney asked, exhaling a plume that curled toward the stars. Margaret hesitated, then spilled. The mentorship program, Riley's connections to venture capital, a pitch contest where the winner got seed funding for a food truck. Vegan fusion, Margaret's dream on wheels. "It's not leaving you," she promised, lacing their fingers. "It's building us." Delaney nodded, but the doubt lingered, a shadow in her gut like undercooked poultry. She threw herself into the bistro harder, experimenting with new menus, roasted beet salads with goat cheese and candied pecans, inspired by Margaret's stories of Oregon orchards, while her lover chased the glittering promise of Silicon Valley mixers. The fracture came on a night thick with summer heat, the kind that turned the city into a pressure cooker. Delaney had booked a rare night off, candles flickering on the loft's reclaimed wood table, a bottle of Napa Cab breathing beside plates of herb-crusted rack of lamb she'd prepped in secret. Margaret was late, 2 hours, then 3 texts unread, the landline silent. When the door finally creaked open at midnight, it wasn't apologies that tumbled out but excuses wrapped in perfume Delaney didn't recognize. Citrus and sandalwood, the scent of boardrooms and ambition. "The pitch went late," Margaret said, shedding her jacket, eyes avoiding the romantic tableau. "Riley's team, they want in. 50 grand, Delaney. We could expand the bistro or the truck." Delaney's fork clattered against porcelain, the sound sharp as a slap. "We? Or you?" The words escaped before she could cage them, laced with the venom of too many solo shifts, too many cold beds. Margaret's face crumpled, then hardened, that foster kid steel rising like a shield. "What, you think I'm using you? After everything? I clawed my way out of nothing for this, for us." The argument escalated, voices ricocheting off the brick walls. Accusations of clinging too tight, of chasing shadows instead of substance. "You're scared," Margaret hurled, tears carving tracks through her mascara. "Scared I'll outgrow this cozy little life you've built around your pots and pans. And you're running," Delaney shot back, heart pounding like a mallet on veal. "Running from the mess we make together, toward some fairy tale where money fixes the broken parts." In the heat of it, Margaret grabbed her phone, scrolling furiously to show investor emails, but Delaney saw the text threaded below. Riley's heart emojis, late-night voice notes that sounded too intimate, too alive. "Who's she then?" Delaney demanded, voice breaking. "The one who smells like opportunity." Margaret froze, guilt flashing like lightning, and in that silence the truth cracked open. A kiss at the after-party, wine loosened and impulsive. A betrayal born of doubt and the thrill of being wanted by someone who didn't carry the weight of shared scars. The loft emptied that night, Margaret's duffel thumping down the stairs like a heartbeat fading. Delaney sank to the floor amid the uneaten lamb, congealing like her resolve, and wept, not for the loss, but for the dream of home she dared to rebuild, only to watch it char. Days blurred into weeks. The bistro survived on autopilot, Jack's covering shifts with quiet efficiency, but Delaney's food lost its fire, dishes plated with mechanical precision instead of passion. She spotted Margaret once from across Market Street, arm linked with Riley, laughing in the sun, her ponytail swinging free. The sight gutted her. A knife twist, slow and deliberate, but Delaney turned away, burying the pain in bushels of heirloom tomatoes and the endless churn of the city. Winter crept in on salt-stiff winds, the holidays a gauntlet of forced cheer. Eggnog brunches where singles mingled awkwardly, fairy lights strung like nooses over the bistro's beams. Delaney dated half-heartedly. A graphic designer with a sleeve of tattoos and easy banter. A professor who quoted Auden over espresso. But none stuck, their touches foreign as ill-fitting gloves. Margaret haunted her still. A specter in every empty stool, every half-eaten pastry. Then one gray February morning, as sleep pelted the windows like accusations, an envelope arrived, cream stock embossed gold, addressed in looping script. Delaney Harper, Harper's Hearth. Inside, an invitation heavy as fate. You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Margaret Elena Ruiz and Riley Alexandra Voss, on the occasion of their marriage. May 15, the Fairmont, San Francisco. Delaney's hands shook as she traced the embossed vines curling around the words, her mind reeling. Marriage. To her. The betrayal stung anew, but beneath it simmered curiosity, a masochistic pull toward closure. She almost tossed it in the fire, the wood stove in the corner, crackling with the remnants of last night's oak, but Jax, peering over her shoulder, snatched it back. Go, they urged, Bowtie askew. Burn the bridge properly, or build a new one. Either way, don't let her ghost you twice. Delaney laughed, bitter as chicory, but the seed took, watered by sleepless nights and the relentless drum of what-ifs. The weeks to May dragged like a bad reduction, but Delaney prepped with the focus of a soldier. A new dress from the boutique on Valencia, emerald silk that hugged her curves without apology, hair trimmed sharp by her barber who knew all her stories. She told herself it was for the free champagne, the schadenfreude of toasting a rival's victory, but deep down it was the ache for one last look, one final word to exorcise the haunt. The Fairmont loomed on the big day. A wedding cake of a hotel with crystal chandeliers dripping like frozen tears, valets in crisp uniforms whisking her keys away. Up the grand staircase, past bouquets of peonies exploding in blush pinks and ivories, to the rooftop terrace where the ceremony unfolded against the bay's glittering expanse. She slipped in late, finding a seat at the back amid a sea of well-heeled guests. Tech moguls in bespoke suits, artists with asymmetrical bobs, queer elders beaming with the hard-won joy of progress. The officiant, a non-binary elder with a voice like velvet thunder, wove vows that spoke of chosen families and radical vulnerability. And there was Margaret, radiant in lace that whispered against her skin, Riley beside her in a tailored jumpsuit, their hands clasped like lifelines. Delaney's throat tightened as they exchanged rings, simple gold bands etched with coordinates, perhaps of the alley where it all began, but it was Margaret's eyes scanning the crowd that undid her, locking on Delaney's with a jolt that spanned the aisle. The reception swirled into motion post-kiss, a whirl of canapes and string quartets, laughter bubbling like the view of Cliquot flowing freely. Delaney nursed a gin and tonic at the bar, the ice melting into bitter pools, when a shadow fell across her. Margaret, alone for the first time, her gown trailing like a comet's tail. You came, she breathed, voice thick with unshed tears, and Delaney, steeling her spine, lifted her chin. Had to see it for myself. Congrats, by the way. She seems shiny. Margaret winced, gesturing to a quiet corner alcove, away from the dance floor's sway. They sat on wrought iron chairs beneath a trellis heavy with jasmine, the scent heady as memory. It's not what you think, she started, hands twisting in her lap. Riley and I, we tried. God, we tried. The funding, the plans, it all sounded perfect on paper. But it was smoke, Delaney. Pretty, but gone with the wind. The story poured out then, raw and ragged. The food truck that launched with fanfare but folded under Riley's micromanaging. The fights that escalated from whispers to screams, the realization that ambition without heart was just another cage. I proposed to her 6 months ago, thinking it'd fix us, tie the knot before the threads unraveled. But last week, she called it off. Said I was still in love with my ghosts. Delaney's pulse thrummed, a tattoo of hope and hurt. Your ghosts. Margaret reached then, tentative, her fingers cool against Delaney's wrist. You. Always you. The one who fed me when I was starving, for food, for kindness, for a chance to believe I was worth more than the streets. Tears spilled now, unchecked, carving paths through carefully applied makeup. I betrayed us because I was scared of how deep you made me feel, how you saw the parts of me I hid even from myself. Riley was safe, shiny, but you're fire. And I ran from the burn. The air between them crackled, charged as the storm clouds gathering over the bridge, and Delaney, heart fracturing open like a geode, cupped Margaret's face, thumbs brushing away salt. I never stopped loving you, you idiot, she confessed, voice rough as gravel. But love isn't a bowl of gumbo. It doesn't keep if you leave it out too long. Margaret leaned in, forehead to forehead, their breaths mingling in the jasmine-scented dusk. Then teach me again. Let me earn it. The bistro, the loft, us start from scratch, but this time no running. Around them the party pulsed on. Riley dancing with a cluster of friends, oblivious or relieved, the quartet shifting to a slow, soulful cover of At Last. Delaney pulled back, searching those dark eyes, seeing the girl from the alley and the woman she'd become. Resilient, radiant, real. One condition, she said, a smile cracking through like dawn. You chop the onions tomorrow. And every day after. Margaret laughed, a sound like bells in the wind, and sealed it with a kiss. Not desperate but deliberate, a vow etched in the fading light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the bay in strokes of molten gold and indigo, Delaney and Margaret slipped away from the revelry, descending the Fairmont's gilded halls hand in hand, the weight of the invitation now a talisman rather than a torment. The city streets below thrummed with Friday night energy. Trolleys clanging, laughter spilling from dive bars, the eternal fog curling like a lover's breath. But for them the world had narrowed to the space between fingertips, the unspoken promise humming like a well-tuned oven. My place, Delaney murmured, hailing a cab with the ease of someone who'd navigated these hills 1,000 times. Margaret nodded, burrowing into her side, the silk of her gown whispering against denim. Anywhere but alone. Back at the loft, the air was thick with the patina of absence, dust motes dancing in the moonlight slanting through the skylight, the faint echo of Margaret's laughter still trapped in the rafters. They moved slow, reverent, shedding the day's armor. The gown pooled like spilled cream on the hardwood, the emerald dress unzipped with fingers that trembled not from cold but from the gravity of return. No urgency drove them now. It was rediscovery, mapping the familiar curves and hollows with the wonder of cartographers charting home after exile. Delaney traced the faint scar on Margaret's hip, a memento from a skateboarding wipeout in her wilder days, and pressed her lips there, soft as a benediction. I missed this, she whispered, voice husky with truth. Margaret arched, fingers threading through auburn strands, pulling her up for a kiss that tasted of champagne and second chances. They talked until the small hours sprawled amid tangled sheets, the city lights winking like conspirators beyond the window. Margaret unspooled the months apart. The food truck's glamorous failure, plated salads wilting under fluorescent lights while Riley scrolled investor decks instead of stirring pots. The therapy sessions in a Castro walk-up, where she'd confronted the foster child fear of abandonment, realizing she'd inflicted it on the one person who'd never wielded it as a weapon. I thought success would fill the hole, she admitted, tracing lazy circles on Delaney's collarbone. But it just made me hungrier for you. Delaney listened, her own confessions rising like steam. The hollow dates, the menus born of grief, the way she'd kept Margaret's old apron folded in a drawer, a relic she couldn't bear to wash. Dawn crept in on tiptoe, gilding the exposed beams, and with it came the mundane miracles, coffee brewing in the French press, its rich aroma chasing away the ghosts. Margaret, in Delaney's oversized tee, padded to the kitchen, pulling eggs and greens from the fridge with the familiarity of muscle memory. Omelets? She asked, and Delaney, leaning against the counter in boxers and a tank, grinned. Only if you don't burn the edges like last time. They cooked together, shoulders brushing, laughter punctuating the sizzle. A pas de deux of whisks and flips, the loft filling with the symphony of homecoming. Over breakfast at the scarred oak table, plans took tentative shape. Margaret enrolling in Le Cordon Bleu part-time, the bistro expanding to brunch with her input, Oregon-inspired biscuits and gravy, infused with wild blackberry reductions. Partners, Delaney said, clinking mugs. In food. In life. Margaret's smile was sunlight breaking through, warm and unwavering. Partners. The road back wasn't linear, of course. San Francisco's hills ensured that. There were arguments sharp as a cleaver. Margaret's impatience with the bistro's slow grind clashing against Delaney's rootedness, old insecurities flaring like flare-ups in a cast-iron skillet. One night, after a brutal review and the Examiner dismissed their new collabs as rustic whimsy, Margaret stormed out, heels clicking on cobblestones toward the familiar pull of Haight Street bars. Delaney let her go, heart in her throat, but texted only once. Alley or loft? Your call. Hours later, Margaret returned, rain-soaked and contrite, collapsing into arms that held without judgment. I almost called Riley, she confessed in the dark. Just to hear a voice that wasn't screaming inside my head. Delaney held her tighter, whispering, "Then scream with me. We're louder together." Therapy became their ritual, separate sessions bleeding into joint ones with a counselor named Theo, a burly dyke with a buzz cut and a knack for cutting through bullshit. Betrayal isn't a scar, it's a teacher, Theo would say as they unpacked the alley encounter, the gumbo that started it all. Margaret learned to voice her ambitions without apology, to chase dreams without fleeing intimacy. Delaney to loosen her grip, trusting that love could weather wanderings. Jax, ever the cheerleader, dubbed their reconciliation the remix, toasting it with shots of mezcal after a packed Friday service. The bistro flourished, word spreading of the queer power couple behind the counter. Delaney's southern soul mingling with Margaret's Pacific Northwest edge. Dishes like Dungeness crab beignet with remoulade and huckleberry gastrique drawing lines out the door. Summer swelled, then waned, marking a year since the wedding that wasn't. To celebrate, they drove north in Delaney's battered Jeep, windows down, the coastal highway unspooling like a ribbon of possibility. Big Sur's cliffs plunged into turquoise waves, redwoods whispering secrets overhead, and they hiked trails hand in hand, pausing at overlooks to share PB&Js and stolen kisses. At Pfeiffer Beach, where the keyhole arch framed the sunset like a vow, Margaret dropped to one knee. Not with a ring, but with a vial of soil from the Tenderloin Alley, mixed with dirt from her childhood backyard in Eugene. "This is us," she said, voice steady as the tide. "Roots in the rubble growing anyway. Marry me? Not with papers or parties, but with this, with every messy, beautiful day." Delaney pulled her up, kissing her fierce and salty, tears mingling with sea spray. Yes. 1,000 times yes. No grand gesture followed, no diamond flash. Just them, exchanging simple silver bands engraved with a shared recipe. Gumbo for two, stir with love. Back in the city, life resumed its delicious churn. Morning markets haggling over heirlooms, afternoon rushes where Margaret's quick quips charmed the brunch crowd, evenings collapsing into each other on the loft's worn sofa, binging the Great British Bake Off with wine and wandering hands. Conflicts arose as they do, Margaret's acceptance into a prestigious apprenticeship in New York sparking a week of tense silences, Delaney's fear of distance a shadow that loomed large. But they talked it through, over midnight slices of key lime pie, deciding on a compromise. Summers in the city, winters upstate, building a second outpost that bridged their worlds. One crisp autumn evening, as leaves skittered across the bistro's patio like confetti, a young woman wandered in, mid-20s, backpack slung low, eyes hollow with the weight of the streets. She ordered water, nursing it at the counter, until Delaney slid a bowl of gumbo her way, steam rising like an invitation. Margaret watched from the pass, her hand finding Delaney's under the stainless steel, squeezing with the quiet certainty of survivors. "Full circle," she murmured, and Delaney nodded, watching the woman's shoulders ease, the first crack of trust forming. In that moment, amid the clatter of forks and the murmur of lives intersecting, they knew. Love wasn't the absence of storm, but the hearth that warmed through it. Years later, when Harper's Hearth had spawned a chain, cozy outposts from Portland to LA, each with a corner stool reserved for the weary, Delaney and Margaret would return to that alley on rainy nights, standing under the awning with mugs of chicory coffee, toasting the girl who'd once shivered there. To feeding the lost, Delaney would say, arm around her wife's waist. And finding our way home. Margaret, curls wild in the wind, would lean in, lips brushing ear. To us. Always. And in the city's endless hum, their story wove on, drama and devotion, heartbreak and healing. A testament to the human hunger for connection, sated one bowl, one kiss, one dawn at a time.